looking at you here to, whoops. Yes, I really think that this presentation is just the beginning, and there's a lot of wisdom in the room too. So one, if I say anything wrong, people should correct me. Please ask questions along the way. I am not a statistician at all, but I was trying to, so I tried to be sorting out sort of what are the things that you need to know? And I think I probably erred on the side of including too many things. Can you guys get
Kathy,
this?
we're seeing your presentation view.
Yeah, why is it doing that? How do I get it out of
Do you
that?
need to share your other screen?
Oh. Let me put it over here.
Yeah, that should fix it.
We can
Better?
edit this out of the recording. No, we're just seeing your
So you need
outlook or your
put
internet.
PowerPoint back on that screen and then go to display settings, if I remember right.
I've never used the presentation piece. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah.
Use presenter view. It's under
We'll see.
monitors there.
Yeah, there's a checkbox at the top. There you are. That's it.
Interesting.
That's right. Baby's happy.
Why? This was working fine before. Leah, maybe I'll have you do it. Can't figure out how to switch the monitors.
This is fine for me if you just have the screen like that.
Because,
Okay,
I can do it, Kathy.
okay. Well, I can get started with this while Leah. So I have much more on these slides than I will talk about in detail, I think, but I wanted to be more comprehensive. I had some help from folks from Microsoft and Denise Frost and a great woman from North Carolina to give comments too. So just, yeah, ask questions along the way. And I do, in the interest of not talking to you for an hour, I moved a whole bunch of the slides on resources and other products and other things at the end. So I'll make sure that everyone gets the slide deck, which will give you links to more than you ever want to read about the redistricting data and other good resources that people have produced to help us use it. Okay. I just wanted to take a moment because there's been so much talk about differential privacy and all the worry about getting out the count, that just to thank everyone who worked so hard. And it's just amazing what people did under just inconceivable conditions last year. And we should be very excited about getting the data finally, even though it's a little late and there's some kinks to work through. All right. So the reason I wanted to have the discussion today was really to think about the communications that we will need to have with community groups, but also mayor's offices and the media and many other foundations, United Ways, about the data quality of the decennial census and sort of fitness of use for the for how we want to apply the data. There's a lot of other topics around the mechanics of ETL, thinking about analysis, interactive tools, those kinds of things. So I think we definitely want to leave those open and people definitely just share them along. And then if there's interest, we can have additional conversations. Okay, so just a I'm gonna, just a reminder about what's in the redistricting file. So it's basically the housing and population counts, occupancy status, and more information by race and voting age, since the main purpose of this file is to help states in their redistricting. So these are the elements that they need to do that. And the other products that are coming, I have a slide in the resources page about the other products, like analogous to SF1 or the other more detailed tabulations will be at in one of the resource sites too. So it depends on what kind of circles you travel in, but there's been a lot of talk about the concerns about application of differential privacy to protect the data from being re-identified or reconstructed. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But as we were talking with the communications group, they also wanted to remind us of all these others. I decided I probably have the wrong title because some of these are sources of error and some of them are things that the Census Bureau does to improve the quality of the data, but they may not get it totally right. So I'll work on the header for next time. But the one that might be most relevant, top of mind for your get out the count community partners or neighborhoods is the undercount, and both that's people of color, African Americans, Hispanics, and young children, non-citizens, places where there's shared custody, that might be most familiar to them and what they are most concerned about, that my neighborhood didn't get counted as well as it should have. And differential privacy will not be on at the tip of their tongue. I think there's been more reporting of missing households by proxies this time because people might not have been home and they might have moved in with family or the evictions that were happening. And then there's some other processing pieces here that I list that were either introduced in 2020 or might be more of an issue in 2020 given the challenges. Okay. So then there was 2020. So as I mentioned, the extraordinary conditions in which the Census Bureau did an amazing job just keeping the trains moving, but the extended time of data collection, sort of where were you living as of April 1st, got dragged out over much time. So the question about who was living where, when, got complicated. People not at their primary residence, if you have colleges or university neighborhoods in particular, but if you live in places with second homes, places where people were doubling up. The question about people being afraid to open the door, the immigration question, which plagued us for a great deal of this time until we won that fight. And then some groups, some places like Louisiana had natural disasters that also made the count more difficult. So these are all the reasons why people more than ever were worried about the quality fitness of the data that we're going to get. And then we add differential privacy. So this change was motivated and should always be started by the sort of increased amount of external data and computing power, which caused the Census Bureau to be concerned. Some analysis they did that caused the Census Bureau to be very concerned about the increased risk of re-identification and reconstruction. And protecting the data is in the DNA of everyone in the census building. It's really sort of a paramount principle. So they decided to apply a new methodology this year for the first time called differential privacy. And I give a definition right there. And the idea is that it protects, it is a rubric that protects all the calculations and tables and data products So it's really looking at everything as a whole to see if to make sure that if you release all of these numbers, that the re-identification or reconstruction isn't possible. And that's both from looking at crosstabs in the table or at microdata, and at the idea of that you could you could merge in assessment files or cell phone records or other things to identify individual people. Is what they're trying to avoid. Next. So I just wanted to give the sort of arc of differential privacy. It doesn't describe this, and there's fantastic work, PowerPoint slides and more details that I will link to if you want to get into the more of the nitty gritty of it. There are, the first step that they needed to do was to set the numbers that they're going to keep as is with no noise. And those are listed here. And the next, after that step, they needed to set the privacy loss budget, which is, if you imagine, a curve, an X and Y axis of accuracy and privacy or safety. This budget identifies sort of the point on the curve, the balance between accuracy and privacy. And that was set by the policy committee at Census, I don't know, back in June, I think. And the number that's given is epsilon, and this is the distribution between people and housing. Leah keeps asking me, is that a lot? Is that a little? Is that too much? Not enough? And that really means that will depend on who you ask. So Allison and I were, with some colleagues on the Census Advisory Committee that said that it should never go above like 12. That would be way too much, and the risk of compromising the reputation and safety of the Census Bureau is too great. And then there were many other people, including folks at IPUMS and other researchers, who were pushing for much more accuracy and much less privacy protection. So I think, and even within the breakdown of people and housing and geographies, and that detailed distribution table gives you sort of the accuracy weight that's given to every table and every geographic level. I would say like census tracts are the most important, but then somebody else would say, no, counties are the most important because I need to, plan for human services. And somebody else might say you need age is the most important because I'm helping seniors, and others will say we need to make sure that race is really good so we get all those races. So there's so much, so many use cases and so many constituencies for the data. It's hard to say. I will say that as a housing policy person, I was, a little sad about the housing share, but that relative accuracy will matter as we think about fitness of use and how much noise is in the different data tables.
So Kathy, the higher number means more accurate, or
higher number is more accurate. Yes, that's the direction. So they released some demonstration data earlier this spring, and I think it was around 12 was the epsilon. So this is a great deal higher than the demonstration data that they put out, for example. And I don't know how much any of this is permeating down to the community level, so you guys can understand. If this never comes up, then that wouldn't surprise me either. Mm-hmm. So once you have the invariance and then you set the budget, then they go through and they insert the noise around the data to protect it. And then they do some post-processing, which if you insert the noise, you're going to end up with some fractions and some negative numbers, and some of the geographies don't quite make sense. So there's some post-processing that's like not related to the differential privacy protection that they do. just a note that the quality, when you read about blogs in the Census Bureau, it's all tuned to the redistricting case. So this is an example of a presentation we saw that they shared with us, like what they were testing. Their threshold was around like this racial group indicator. And this was their target for how they were judging quality for the redistricting case. In other use cases, you know, this might not be the most important indicator. Next. All right, so some data will be, and this is in a recent blog from Ron Jarman, impossible or improbable. And I ran out of time to actually get all the numbers on this, but they have published at different levels how many records, and it's small, but they're going to be there. So if there's, you know, you might have 100% units occupied, but no people, children with no adults, really large households. So this is mainly at the block level. There's likely to be other inconsistencies to come as they introduce more crosstabs and later products. And it also wasn't totally clear to me whether things would be consistent across products. Like if this redistricting data would match the next demographic and housing characteristic data equivalent to SF1. So I think as we start to look at it, other things will emerge that don't make sense. There was one time when Allison and I found no efficiencies, and I think in the ACS data in New Orleans, which we knew wasn't true. So we didn't report numbers that didn't make sense to us. Next.
Cassie, there's a question from Liz.
Oh, yes.
Happy, is it easier if I just jump in?
Oh, synchronous noise.
Yeah.
I am not sure I know what synchronous noise is. The next product is the next product is some demographic profiles, which is place level. And the DHC file that I can send a link to will have the same algorithm applied to people in housing within that file, but I don't know if it's going to match the totals in the redistricting file.
Okay.
I don't know, Allison, you can chime in, but they seem to not be sure of that at one point.
Yeah.
I'll put a link in here to the transcript that I'm talking about, but no need to dwell on it now, but just as an FYI, and we can chat later.
Yes, the join tables are definitely more complicated. Yeah, great. We'll grab that and put it into the resources. So I just want, as I was talking to other folks, we have been through this together once. So for those of you who remember, the long form of the decennial census was transitioned out as it was replaced by the American Community Survey. And there was just a lot of angst. We had, I counted 5 sessions on it at NNIP meetings across the years. I don't know, probably hundreds of hours of bar conversation and dismay, and how are we going to manage this as we worked on it together. This was a presentation from Mark Mather up at the top from PRB. So we have really good friends, good smart friends that are working on guidance. And this below was a community training that Phyllis Betts gave from Memphis. And what we really learned through, work through together, and to hear what communities needed to make the most from the data while understanding and communicating the limitations. We made a lot of progress within our community since we know lots about communicating data to different kinds of audiences. And so I just encourage us as we go through the data releases for the next year long, that we share as much as we can along the way about what's working and what's not working. Next. I think I think either you will find weird things, your research assistants will find weird things. You might have community groups that see weird things in the data. So just on thinking about what steps can you do since we can't change the data, to tell the story or to get the data get the information you need for the use case that you're looking for. So the number one thing that they're saying, which is just to just add it up. You will get more accuracy as you add up the pieces. So if you add up 5 tracks, you're going to get more accuracy than any of those individual tracks, which is, if depending on what your question is, might be an easy way to solve things. There's other national and local data sources that you all know and we know well to look at to see if we have some answer that doesn't make sense, how do we interpret it in context? There is the ACS characteristics with the census totals. I sent that note around about the 1-year ACS changing this year because of quality didn't reach up to their par, but as far as I know, the plan is still to publish the 5-year ACS, and we have the 5-year ACS from last year too. So we should use that in combination and pair with qualitative data. You know your neighborhoods and your communities and your so to the idea about choosing what to present or choosing not to present something because you know it's not true, you might need to pull in some other local knowledge. And I'm sure there's other ideas that you'll all come up with along the way. Next. So just thinking about messaging, and I was thinking this is a little bit messaging to ourselves as well as sort of self-therapy, as well as messaging to other groups about being a good consumer, as we always would say, about using data and trusting other local knowledge to review what's there. The weird results do not mean that the entire decennial census is garbage. You know, they actually show that the balancing of privacy and accuracy is happening, which is so important to protect people's information. And as my statistician friends will remind us, the differential privacy method does have the advantage of being more transparent and measurable. So they're going to be publishing the code that they used. And they did do adjustments in the past for censuses, data swapping and top coding and grouping categories, but much of that was done sort of behind the scenes, and they can't share most of that because they're afraid of reconstruction. So it was a black box about what they did to the 2010 census, for example, and we just all took that as gospel and moved along with it, ignoring that piece. And here's, oh, Mark has a long one. I think, Mark, I can get to the table where it listed the improbable and improbable possible things. I think, yeah, they would almost always be limited to block group. I think that's probably true. I should find out more. I'll go find the numbers on those results at the track level and share them afterwards. Yeah, and we generally tell people not to use block group level ACS data anyway, obviously, because of the margins of error. So how can you help? So these are just a couple of great things that our partners have done in the past. D3, I think there's Detroit people on the call have done blogs on data literacy and how to understand things. I think it's up to your judgment about whether you not do what I did and list all of the ways that they could introduce error, but really to address the people's questions that you're hearing in the community about what they don't maybe need to know about every imputation process that happens, but what are they asking about? addressing the undercount question. And then these are, they call them just-in-time nuggets, but to show some New Orleans examples about just text that they had on their website, answering questions in the reports that they had, or analysis or online graphics. And then also about sort of how do I write about this? One of the things is, to say about or almost, or, I mean, they were giving, in this case, it was a margin of error question, but there are ways to, or not make a big deal out of small differences, those kinds of things that you can help people do. Next. Noah and his team said that I could share this with you. They've been working with Grand Rapids folks at the Community Research Lab on their plan for the census, and they had some really just great, a great structure to it, I thought, but starting with guiding principles, thinking about the elements that they're going to take on, who need to be consulted, who had knowledge in the community about what kind of questions people were excited about answering with the new data, and products that are there. So I thought it would be good to share, as not that the answers within the elements will be different for all of you depending on your role and who else is doing what in your community. But I thought the structure was really helpful to just for planning ahead. And maybe you won't be doing anything with the redistricting data, but I would recommend that you think about communication, so that if you do get questions from other analysis that will certainly come out in the papers and by other researchers and other organizations, that you're ready to talk about it. I'll send this link around later too. It's still internal and in draft form. So here's the discussion questions that I thought of, that I'm happy to let the conversation go in any direction it needs to go. Or if you have some examples of what you've been doing lately to do the planning. Oh, good. Stephanie just looked it up. Excellent. The areas are limited.
I've been working on the census planning, so it was in my recent.
Excellent.
research.
Thank you for confirming that. Well, that's good news for us.
Kathy, I don't know any of this, but the undercount, when do we get information about what they think the potential undercount is?
I think is the middle of next year. A while.
Yeah, and Kathy, there's two ways they calculate undercount. One is essentially at the national level, using the demographic analysis, which is pulling together administrative records, birth records, and death records across decades to come up with, and immigration, come up with a total across the nation. And then the other way is the post-enumeration survey, which is meant to look at the problems at a more granular level. And but the post-enumeration survey is basically toast, because is that fair, Kathy? That's fair. Because they were also, they were as hard as they were trying to do the regular census, they then later tried to do they're probably still trying to do the post-enumeration survey. So it's not really going to do much by way of verifying the accuracy of the census. So,
and some people on the demographic analysis, captures the undercount of young children better. So, they both had pros and cons in that piece. But yeah, having that answer about what is the undercount and when will we know, at the big picture level would be a good sort of FAQ to have.
Yeah, and hopefully they would do a comparison of the demographic analysis relatively soon. So
yeah, I definitely saw 2022 on some. It's hard to. I think I will. I can work with our sources to try to get a more detailed schedule, which I couldn't find online really. So I was pulling from slides from the Census Bureau and other communication. So I will try to hunt down where the best information is about an actual schedule. I think they've been, obviously they've just been kind of taking one thing at a time. So maybe once this redistricting data is out, they can feel more comfortable about at least giving a month or, you know, set a range for when we were going to get the other data.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments?
I have a question potentially for others in the group. One of the challenges that we're thinking about and talking with our peers in the community who work with census data is thinking about how we evaluate, like if there are systematic ways to understand error locally in the data other than just kind of waiting to see something funny, right? Because like with ACS, you've at least got the margins of error to be able to kind of tell you how much error there is in a particular estimate. And in this case, it seems like it'll just be kind of like gut check. Does it seem weird, right? Which, like, to some extent, I'm curious if others have thought about how much they plan to use the demonstration data that should be released side by side with the redistricting data to compare or to look more closely at the local metrics, similar to those national metrics that the Census Bureau released, to understand specifically the error in their areas for certain geographies or variables.
So the demonstration data is applying, people can correct me if I say this wrong, applying the parameters they're using for the 2020 data to the 2010 census. So you can sort of see how much there's difference between the old way, the 2010 old way, and the 2010 with the data with the current methods. So, and I haven't personally done the crunching on those files. I understand it's a little challenging, but maybe they're cumbersome anyway. One of our colleagues told us. But there are, I think that there are, I know, and there are these national metrics that I do link to that have like, what's the error for places at different population levels, how many of them are so far off. And Allison and I were, in our recommendations, tried to get them to do more breaks on that. You know, they just said like, how many of them are greater than 10% wrong versus trying to get more detail on that. I don't know if they're gonna listen to us. So I don't know, is there anybody on the call that's worked with the demonstration data? I never found the time, honestly, or had enough of a driving need here.
Yeah, so I know one of our data analysts has done it, and that's like our plan moving forward. One of our chunks of work that we're going to try to do is compare the final product, because what we worked with was what was released, I don't know, a year ago, where they were like, hey, tell us how bad it is. And it was really bad because like, we had African American census tracts in Detroit moving all their Black population to Plymouth, which is super weird. So we're gonna be doing something similar, just to like, we're currently in the brainstorming phase, but I think one of the ideas that we're throwing around, once upon a time, there was a map that somebody in NNIP made that used margins of error and kind of like randomly populated a map within somewhere in the range. So Erica was thinking about that and how we could somehow use the demonstration data to kind of visualize this, like, okay, well, if you apply this noise in the differential privacy thing, like this is what it looked like in 2010, and then you apply this noise and it can randomly look anything in this range, right? And it would just kind of like, so there's a couple different, that's like the dream scenario.
Yeah.
More than likely, I will be having one person will do like a zoom in on a couple census tracts or blocks to just show how it works and double check prison populations because those were the places where things got pretty bad, in Michigan at least. I don't know if,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think the demonstration data is probably the most tangible and understandable thing I've seen come out of the Census Bureau so far.
And that can give you sort of local impacts, I think, Liz, you're right, versus places over this many population generically all over the country versus
They
what
have
does it do
a
for Columbus.
ton of quality metrics, and if you have a degree in stats, like, and you want to dive into 3-hour workshops from the Census Bureau, like, more power to you. But I don't think that those are like, you can distill
I think
those
there might be
down.
nuggets there. You can, without a statistics degree, because I don't have one, work your way through, but it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And the other, there's going to be a report coming out that I think on this, I think I skipped it, Leah, but on the slides, I do have a sort of a stay up to date links to the census data projects, the American Statistical Association, APDU, and IPUMS. Yep. So these are links to the sign up sheets to get their newsletters. And I recommend that that you all sign up. So at least this will make sure that you sort of get the latest. You can decide along the way whether things that you get are relevant or not relevant. But this is between these outlets, you're going to get both official census data stuff. American Statistical Association has a report coming out about the state quality metrics. So you'll know with, like for Ohio, you'll know, if not for Columbus in itself, with their additional analysis that they had some people detailed with the census. There you go, 8/12, even faster.
Is that when they're releasing the data? I know they're having a webinar that day. I didn't realize they were.
The webinar got moved, I think. I don't know. I just got the email.
The webinar got moved to the 10th, I think,
Yep.
and then they're going to do a press release and release the data on the 12th.
Oh,
The
excellent.
email came through like right before I logged into this.
Oh, wow. Excellent. All right.
I can, so here's some forthcoming resources, just to what I've heard that are coming out, and including a guide like the ACS Users Guide. And I just don't know, I couldn't find out the timing on everything quite yet. I think when I flip through the reference slide, just so I can tell them what's there, Leah. These are the early data products. Somebody told me 2022 on the post-enumeration survey and demographic analysis. Then these are group 2 products. I don't know if they're using that in public, Allison, but group 1 was all done through this same algorithmic method that worked for all those tables. And then group 2 products are over here that are more detailed tables or family by person tables. And these had very small numbers. And they were, I don't know, I never feel like we really got a good answer on the microdata file that they, Allison, do you? Like, are they going to do a microdata, a PUMS file? I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Yeah. They never said no that I remember, but they never said yes. And then, is that all? Oh, yeah, just for people who are ready to jump on that FTP site, there's great documentation and import scripts for R and SAS and prototypes for testing if you wanted to do all your programming, ahead of time. We only have a week. So definitely you should jump to use that to make it easier on the FTP files that will be released in a couple of weeks or in a week now. And then the last one, I think I just had some other, the supplemental files. So geographic crosswalks, boundary files I thought would be important to you, and other, the demonstration project. So you can stop sharing the screen. Just all those links I've been trying to assemble over the past week to put into one place for you. And Liz has a new R package we can add to the resources.
Yeah. You know, I think it might be helpful to just remind everyone that that you're likely to find weird things in this census, and just like you would at your own administrative data set, right, or any other a lot of data that you work with, and to logic check it, right? So it's not just about differential privacy. I mean, I would be looking to see if you have a large Latino population. I suspect it's going to be undercounted. So that would be something to be aware of. If you work in a community where, there's a lot of Latino children in your most recent estimates and they don't show up in the census, it's probably the census that's wrong. I hate to say that, but but the children are based on birth records, right? So and yeah, there's a good reason to think that Latinos are pretty substantially undercounted. And then also, if you're a college town, those were very difficult to accurately count because so many students had gone home. If you live in a community that has, like New York, a lot of the population was in the Hamptons, in the Upper East Side. So depending on, you have to think about New Orleans, where I live, is a little weird because we maybe have some people who went to second homes, and then maybe some people's second homes were in New Orleans. So I'm not sure how that'll affect us, but it's, you just need to do some good logic checking, I think. And all those things will probably be easier to identify than the differential privacy stuff. And then the differential privacy stuff is going to be more random. And those demonstration products, Stephanie, that you were talking about, I know it'll be great to dig into those, and I hope somebody will be doing that. But that will only answer the issues that differential privacy introduced, and not the other issues, right?
All those other, yeah.
Yeah, so those have to be thought about.
Allison, would you say that we should probably be more worried about the undercount issues than differential privacy? In terms of what?
Well, the undercount will probably the undercount will probably be easier to spot because it'll be more logical. Differential privacy,
easier to explain.
Yeah, and to explain. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other piece is, I think it's probably going to affect places we care about more. So differential privacy is applied, equally to poor, rich, all, neighborhoods of all races. So anything strange it does, but obviously we know that the undercount hits the neighborhoods we care about and work in.
Yeah. And I think the thing too about differential privacy is that, they're generating the redistricting file, giving it to us at the block level, but it's not intended for use at the block level. It's intended to be rolled up, and the accuracy improves when you roll it up. So, once you roll it up, it's going to be pretty accurate, but you still need to look for all those undercount issues.
Differential privacy accurate. It won't be.
What do you mean by that? I mean, once you roll it up, it's going to be, there's always going to be some noise, right? But there's be less noise once it's rolled up. Now, how far up is a question, right? I'm worried about, single census tracts, and most of our neighborhoods are more than one census tract, but some are individual census tracts that don't have a lot of population. And I don't know what we'll do to display that data, because it's probably going to be a little strange.
Hopefully not. We'll see.
Yeah.
Everyone can send along the strangest thing you found in the file from your city. It could be a contest.
Yeah.
I'll send the prize.
Yeah.
That could actually be kind of a fun blog post.
Oh yeah, it could be, couldn't it?
Like,
thing you
it
found.
would be kind of fun.
Yeah.
I was wondering though, I mean, we've been immersed obviously in differential privacy, swimming around our Allison's in my head for the past 4 years or something. But But does anyone care in the regular world? Like, is anybody worried about this? I mean, whether it's like community groups or funders, or I think Liz, you had some, you know, I don't know, maybe the local governments are aware and worried about it.
Yeah, we've been, I mean, without trying to freak people out, we've also been trying to educate the folks in our data user group here. And I know, Kathy, you helped us out so much by you and somebody from the Census Bureau presenting to that group last year. And then I just gave them an update on some of the what we know and what we still don't know about the data that's coming out and, you know, potential error in the data. Some of the folks who are like the local government practitioners, data folks, GIS analysts, whatever, are starting to realize how it might affect them. Like, I think it's finally sinking in. Like, oh, well, I use census data all the time to figure out what's going on with the demographics around a park in my community. And what am I going to use if not some of these smaller granularity numbers? So, and of course, I still don't have total answers for them about how ACS might be impacted down the road. Maybe you have more information on that, Kathy, but at this point, I'm still kind of like, I don't know. I think we're all going to be getting used to and have to get comfortable with new sources of error that we are not yet accustomed to, and we'll get there and we'll support each other. But yeah, there will be a lot of questions until we figure it out. So, I mean, people seem to care. It's more the technical folks in local governments,
Yeah.
but they're not yet sure what to do about it and are definitely looking for guidance. So this is super helpful, Kathy, like this presentation and continuing to have conversations with other folks who are thinking about how to communicate about how to address it, right? It's going to be important to have these ongoing conversations for sure.
Yeah, it's that same, like, you want to be honest about the limitations, but not, you know, panic people into tossing it all out, because it's like it's the backbone of what we have. So it's the Census Bureau went through a lot of effort to try to make it as good as they could with the raw data that they had and the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have any updated information about the ACS. I think I heard like it felt like the date kept getting pushed back, like 2025 sticks in my head, is the latest thing I heard. And there will obviously be many constituencies watching, I think, very closely. And the partnership with the American Statistical Association is fantastic, because the people who, you know, it just adds capacity to the Census Bureau, because they've just been, you know, crazed. Those poor staff have been run ragged over the last year that are so amazing and devoted to their work. So I think they haven't, you know, had the time, for example, to focus on maybe some better communications earlier out on the redistricting data like we had hoped. But and also just the capacity to do a bunch of the testing and quality metrics and what are the best quality metrics and all of that. So so having that additional capacity was a really great precedent that they let the ACA come in as partners on this. Anything else? Well, thank you, everybody who put links in the blog. We will add those to the resource list. I do think that I love the census products blogs. I find them super interesting and generally clear. You may not like everything they say, and they may not answer all your questions, but I think they really are trying to have a stream of communications about what they're doing. So it is worth at least, like I said, signing up for their list so that you can just be aware of what resources are there when you do need them along the way. And I can't wait to see all the exciting analysis that comes out. All right, well, I'll let everybody have an extra 5 minutes back in their day, since it's the end of the day for us East Coast people.